Hello, BookTube. I'm here to do a tag, and I was tagged by Mark at Book Time with Elvis for the Why I Haven't Read These Books Yet tag. And it was a weaponized tag created by Greg at another Bibliophile Reads. And he weaponized it from a video by Crystal at fiberartsy entitled Why I Haven't Read These Science Fiction Books Yet. And so Greg made it a little more general. I watched his tag and I thought, that's kind of interesting. And then Mark he was tagged and Mark tagged me. And after watching it again, I go, I think I know what I can do with this. I can make it, it's an interesting tag, but I can throw some other things in there because there's a lot of things that I can choose that have just sort of dovetailed. And we'll get into the dovetailing in a moment. There's 6 questions. The 6th question is tag, so it's a very short tag, but I don't think this is going to be a short video. Do I ever make short videos? You don't need to answer that. The first one is a classic book that I haven't read. It's sort of books that you've had on the shelves or in your mind and you've wanted to read, but you never got around it, and sort of why haven't you got around to it? First one is classic one, and it's more recent things that have come up that made me rethink about this. I was doing a live, I can't remember which one it was, but the question came up of this classic book, and what do I think of it? And I said, well, I haven't read it. I've attempted it many times, but there were problems of me not being able to finish it at the time. I didn't go into any details. And then Steve Donahue sort of was mentioning, I didn't think he would like this. It's a huge, sprawling novel. It's Clarissa, or The History of a Young Lady by Samuel Richardson. It's over 1,500 pages. This is very large size. It's like the size of a large hardcover. And it's an epistolary novel, letters all the way through. And I didn't think Steve Donahue would have liked it, but it turns out that he really, really likes it. So I was like, oh, okay, interesting. And then another one of my subscribers, a longtime commentator, great commentator, and she's following the Future History Project, Claire Shepard. You've probably seen her comments around, and she really likes this too, and it's come up in other conversations we've had in the comments. So I'm thinking, well, I should start this again, but I've attempted it 3 times so far, and I'll go through the reasons that I haven't finished these. The first time was probably when I was in my late teens or early 20s. And I'm pretty sure it was at the time that I read Don Quixote, which I'm rereading now, and I'll be finished within the week. I didn't appreciate Don Quixote at the time, and I clearly didn't appreciate this. I don't know how far I got, I don't remember. Then, around 2004-ish, I decided I got a copy, a really rough copy, at a book sale. And I thought, I'm going to read this again. So I started reading it, and what stopped me that time was I got shingles in my left eye. Now, for those who don't know what shingles are, if you had, most people have had chickenpox. So the chickenpox virus sort of goes dormant. And then for whatever reason, as you get older, or even when you're younger as well, the virus can re-erupt and cause shingles. And it's usually caused by your immune system dropping. So it happened in my left eye. So I had blisters in my eye, blisters all on my around my forehead. I still have a bad scar here, and blisters up through my scalp. I still don't have much feeling in all this area. It affects the nerves, but it affected the occipital branch of the trigeminal nerve. Now, this here is a nerve that goes above your teeth, up and around your eye, and everything. And this is damaged. And let's just say it's pain with a capital P. And the capital P is hundreds of feet tall. Let's put it that way. So yeah, everything was dropped at that time, and I recovered from it, obviously. And then I come to England, a few years later, and I'm not sure when. Probably about 10 or 12 years ago, 10 years ago or so. I picked up this copy at a sort of it was a damaged or a returns penguin in a bookshop in Cambridge, and since then I've had it in a bad place and it got some sunning there. But I decided to pick this up again, and I probably got maybe up to 500 pages, so almost a third of the way through. Guess what happened? I had another bout of shingles. It's not the book. I am convinced it has nothing to do with the book, but it's now, when I think of it, I almost start twitching in my eye when I think of this, and every time that I've thought of this since then, it's like a trigger for me. But because of the conversations that I've had, I do want to read this again. And this year, I have I've missed a couple months, but I'm going to catch up on these things. Big books every month, like at least one big book every month, and this is going to be next year. This is definitely going to be next year. In other words, because I'm going to carry this on with this, so this will eventually be read finally. And if I get shingles again on the fourth attempt, this book, it'll be forbidden for anybody to mention this book, and I will get rid of it and never think of it again. Knock on wood that it doesn't happen. Anyway, that's number one classic book. As I say, some interesting things here, or at least I think they're interesting. Number two is a fiction book. Now, again, like I say, things are dovetailing. And I like BookTube, obviously, because I do videos. I like a lot of people say, "Oh, BookTube made me do it" and stuff like that. I don't really like that. Like, I don't really get too many. I don't get my arm twisted to do stuff. I'll jokingly say that, but the thing that I find is that events are happening, and I go, "Yeah, I've wanted to do that for a while. This is a good excuse. Now is the time to do it. You have no excuse to not do it anymore. So do it now." And that's what I've done. And what's come up with this book is talking to dovetailing Greg at another Bibliophile Reads. He wants to read in January, or at least he's slated for January, is The Recognitions by William Gaddis. Here, I don't have a book. I don't have the book yet, but there's a JPEG of the first edition. It's a book that I've wanted to read, so this, I think, will fit into big books, and we'll read this in January, and I'm looking forward to it, because I go, okay, well, it's many years since I've wanted to read this. Here is a perfect excuse for me to read it, so we'll do it then. And then a nonfiction book to read. Now, again, dovetailing and a little story tacked on as well. I did the first video that I did for Desert Island Books was with Mark, Book Time with Elvis, who has tagged me in on this as well. So that's why I say there's the dovetailing. And when we were talking, we sort of discovered a mutual like of many books, authors, types of books, and something else that I rarely find in people is a love of Zulu history, of the Zulus from South Africa. And we talked about the film and how he got into it and everything like that. And about a year or so ago, in late 2020, I got a huge raft of like 40 some books on Zulu. And I was starting to read these in late 2020, and I was going to continue on because there was some. And the next one that I was in January, I wasn't reading just solely that, but I was reading other things. But I had a heart attack in January, late January, 2021. See, there might be a bit of a pattern here starting. But anyway, which stopped me from reading these, and they sort of got buried here in my piles. Um, and I was trying to remember the book. I thought it was Ian Knight, but I'm pretty sure it's this one now. I can't access it, but it's a larger book, Rorys Drift. I think this is it. We'll use this as an example anyway. But the book I'm thinking of is about Rorys Drift. It's a new appraisal, and it has archaeology in it. And this is by Adrian Greaves, who is a historian and actually a clinical psychologist, I think, as well. But he has sort of looked at the excavation material and a reappraisal in the sense that Rorys Drift has always been heralded in British history as great valiant heroes, vanquishing and surviving. But that was a lot of made up stuff, like by the press, not so much by the press, but by the British Army, because of the previous days disaster at Isandlwana. And this is all 1879. This is January 23rd or whatever, and there's the other dovetailing thing. I had my heart attack on January 25th, so it's very close to these things. So yeah. A lot of connections here. But it was a disaster, Chelmsford, and so it was partially done to cover up of that kind of thing. So he goes through all the details apparently in this, and I want to read this if this is the one I'm thinking of, or there could be another one by Ian Knight that I'm thinking of. So it's one of the others, but we'll assume it's this one for the moment until I get it. And I couldn't find information online for it. I know where the book is, but it's just too difficult to get to. Anyway, and the other sort of thing that's interesting with this is that when I was in Canada, I lived in Kitchener-Waterloo, and John Laband, who's another historian, sort of Zulu historian and Zulu war historian, he taught, or he still teaches probably, at Waterloo University. I never got to know him very well, but he came into my bookshop a couple times, and I knew sort of the excavations were happening at some point at Rorys Drift, and I never pursued it, but I sort of thought, in retrospect, that I could have possibly parlayed my way into it if I could have afforded it to do X-ray, and that would have been a dream thing. So that was a lost opportunity, or potential lost opportunity. I don't know if it would have ever happened, but I sort of think back and go, if I knew what I sort of know now and knew what was happening, like in the connections that were made, I would have given it a shot for sure. Anyway, so that's the nonfiction book, or not, whether that's the right one or not. And then we got a genre book, and again, it's sort of talking about recent discussions, and with booktubers, and as I say, how it dovetails. So 3 months from now, I would do this tag, and it might be totally different. I was talking to Brandy at the Book Eclectic. And I'll try to remember to put all the links down to the booktubers I'm talking, and any other links. And talk about science fiction again, as we do many times. And she mentioned that she would like to read a science fiction author, and this is what I'm doing. And no, it's not Simak, so keep your finger off the stop button. It's not Simak this time. It is an S, but it's not Simak. Anyway, and she was talking that she'd like to read the Hyperion Cantos, or at least Hyperion, by Dan Simmons. Excuse me. I've read it a number of times. I don't need another excuse to read it. I read the first two, Hyperion and Fall of Hyperion, last year. Planned on reading Endymion and the Rise of Endymion following that. It never happened. So I sort of said that, well, let's, at some point, maybe in the new year or whatever, let's get together and read maybe the whole cantos, especially if you like the first one. But then she mentioned that she has another novel by him. She never read anything about. I've never read anything else by him except a couple short stories, but they were all related to the Hyperion cantos. And she says she has the book The Terror by Dan Simmons. And this is sort of a horror story, but it's the story about the Franklin expedition. And I want to read that as well. So that's, again, going to be on it. And then we talked about other ones that he wrote, sort of briefly, things that I want to read. But again, another story that goes back a little bit with the Zulu one. When I was in university, or excuse me, I did have a chance this time, and I couldn't afford to go on this excavation. It was on Franklin expedition excavation, where they were they actually re-excavated the some of the bodies they found. And I think there's a really good book. It's called Frozen in Time. Maybe it is. It's a small book, but it's really, really good. And it's got photos of the frozen bodies, if you're game for that. So that was another missed opportunity. I went somewhere else. I went to, it was a cool thing. I went to a whaling site at the mouth of the St. Lawrence River. So that was fun. That was interesting. So yeah, so as I say, there's some dovetail and some connections with this. Now, the other one is sort of because I was talking about, I would have read it, but I did miss reading it because I got ill again in April. Now, it's a book. It is not the longest book I've had here. It's not the longest book that I've ever had that I haven't done it, but I did have a copy of this for many, many years in Canada, like 30, 40 years ago, and I never got around to reading it. I've never read it. And I'm going to rectify that shortly, in hope before the end of the year. And that's Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace. And this is the Penguin edition. So this is probably what I've had. I'm using this as an example. I know I've had this book in the past, like up to 40 years ago, and I never got around to reading it. So, and I will now. Well, over the next few months, before the end of the year, knock on wood, I can do that. Yeah, so that's sort of the end of it. I will tag, let me see, who can I tag? Well, Mark's already done that. Let's see, definitely going to tag Brandy if she's up for this. Yeah. If I can think of anybody else, I'll put it down. But definitely Brandy, I'm tagging you. But yeah, so thanks for tagging me, Mark. It was interesting. When I first thought, I was thinking, okay, what can I do with this? How can I choose? And then all of a sudden, like I say, the dovetailing came in, and it worked. It worked out well, I think. So, and I do apologize getting late getting to this, but there were some other videos I wanted to slot in. I think I did say that I was going to do it on Thursday, but I lied. So this is going to go up on Friday afternoon. Anyway, take care, BookTube. And if you're interested in doing this, please... sorry, I thought the video had stopped. Please do it. It's a great... it's a great tag, and it makes you think about things. And as I say, and as a lot of them can be, you get a little story along with it. So thanks, Greg, for creating it, and thanks for Crystal giving him the idea to weaponize it. Take care, BookTube.